Welcome, you're watching Kaleidoscope Sri Lanka Live News Capsule. Sri Lanka's National Adaptation Plan for Climate Change is from 2016 to 2025, covering adaptation at two levels based on the needs of 9 key vulnerable sectors and cross-cutting national needs of adaptation. With me today is Dr. Sonali Senaratne Sellamuttu, the Global Green Growth Institute's country representative to Sri Lanka and the team lead for the National Adaptation Plan Readiness Support Project. GGGI is a treaty-based international intergovernmental organization of which Sri Lanka became a member in 2019. What exactly is a National Climate Adaptation Plan?
These are plans that are put together at a national level by countries to support them in addressing the adverse impacts of climate change. And these are done basically at the medium and long term, looking at recommendations and seeing how the country can adapt both in the medium and long term. These are key policy instruments that countries put together. Actually, this was set up by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and was initiated in 2010. This is something that is updated usually on a rolling basis.
So does Sri Lanka have one?
Yes, in fact, Sri Lanka does have one, and Sri Lanka was actually one of the pioneering countries that initially developed its National Adaptation Plan. We call them the NAPs. So the current NAP is running from 2016 when it was launched to 2025. Usually the NAPs are updated on a rolling basis, and we are currently supporting the government of Sri Lanka in revising the National Adaptation Plan for Sri Lanka. And this is running from, will cover the period of 2025 to 2034.
What are the salient points in this plan?
Savi, there are several key points that are covered in these plans. The first is we cover what is called horizontal adaptation planning, which means that we cover different sectors that are specifically vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So for example, in Sri Lanka, we are covering 13 sectors, and these are wide ranging. So they sort of range from things like agriculture, fisheries, livestock, biodiversity, all the way to things like human settlement, health, transport, energy, industry. So basically we cover this range of sectors because the impacts of climate change are actually different in terms of how they interact with each of these sectors. And in addition to that, we are also looking at, for the first time, developing provincial level adaptation plans. So there's going to be 9 provincial level adaptation plans that are also developed that take on board consultations that we have done at the provincial level, bringing on board more local stakeholders into the picture. In addition to that, the National Adaptation Plan of Sri Lanka, the updated one, is also going to be bringing on board gender and social action plan, which will align with this, understanding again that in terms of gender and social inclusion, climate change impacts differ in terms of how they impact different community groups, particularly different marginalized vulnerable groups. So the idea is to ensure that gender and social inclusion is also mainstream throughout the entire plan when we think of all the different sectors, and also when we think of not just national level but also provincial level.
While everything looks good on paper, it sounds very good. What needs to be in place realistically on the ground for a holistic and workable NAP?
One of the key things is an enabling environment. And with that, I mean also the institutional architecture and the governance framework that will support in actually implementing the plan. So what we don't want to do is develop a number of plans that just remain on someone's shelves. We just want to ensure that they're actually implemented at the end of the day. So for that, there's quite a complex, I would say, governance structure that has to go into place, which includes at the national level different sectors that I mentioned, getting involved in terms of being the focal point for the adaptation interventions happening within those sectors. But in addition to that, we need to bring in the provincial level counterparts. So there are actually currently, with the Ministry of Environment taking the lead, as well as chief secretaries in the different 9 provinces, there are provincial climate cells that have been set up and provincial climate boards that act as governance bodies to support in implementing adaptation interventions at the provincial level. In addition to that, in the institutional architecture, Savi, we are bringing on board, there is the private sector that we would like to bring on board. There is a CSO forum, so ensure that civil society organizations and NGOs also have their voice within this institutional architecture. We are also cognizant of the fact that youth play a key role in terms of climate action. Many of the NAPs that have been released by other countries have a big emphasis on youth, and we would like to ensure that in our updated national adaptation plan that there is a youth forum that is also linked up in terms of the overall institution, as well as research, Savi, because you need to make informed decisions, you need to have knowledge that is based on cutting edge research. So these would be the different elements that will form the institution to support with implementation. That's one element. The other thing is capacity building, ensuring that all these different key sector stakeholders involved have the appropriate capacity and are trained so that they can support in the implementation. And the other is that we are very much focusing on investment plans. So identifying estimating what are the investments that are required to implement particular adaptation interventions in the different sectors, as well as in the 13 sectors, as well as at a provincial level, to ensure that these investment plans are put together with the implementation plans, so that any key development agency, donor organization, any stakeholder who's interested in picking up a particular adaptation intervention, whether it be in a specific sector or whether it be in a specific province, has the opportunity to do that.
Do we have any tangible, quantifiable goals that we have set out to meet?
In addition to a country's national adaptation plan, for example, Sri Lanka's national adaptation plan, under the Paris Agreement, which is an agreement which is part of the larger United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, each country puts together what they call NDCs, they are nationally determined contributions to support in reducing GHG gases. So in that, usually the targets are set for the mitigation, which is to reduce the gases, the GHG gases. What we are focusing on is also adaptation. So in terms of adaptation, there aren't any specific targets as such, but there are specific strategies that are put in place. There is a monitoring and evaluation program that's also put in place as part of the National Adaptation Plan to help the Ministry of Environment as well as other lead government agencies to monitor the different adaptation interventions that we are proposing, to identify on a regular basis whether we are actually achieving those or not. But in terms of specific targets for the country, those targets are currently for the NDCs in terms of mitigation. The adaptation is there, but they don't have specific targets lined up with them.
Did you know that Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn? Don't forget to subscribe, follow and like us for more.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Sri Lanka Life.